Everyone already knows about Death Valley in July. July is the famous month. It is the one on the warning signs and the weather segments, the one the records belong to, the hottest air temperature ever measured on the surface of the Earth. 134 degrees was recorded here at Furnace Creek on the 10th of July, 1913. When people picture Death Valley at its worst, they are picturing July. So they prepare for July. They bring the extra water. They start their hikes at dawn. They check the tires before they leave home, because they have read that the road can get hot enough to destroy them. And then August comes and something quiet happens. The heat segments stop running. The crowds thin out. The resort rates drop. The park gets emptier, and from behind the wheel of an air-conditioned car, calmer. Nothing about the drive-in feels like a warning anymore. That feeling is the first mistake, because August in Death Valley is not July's cooler, gentler cousin. The heat barely drops at all. The single hottest temperature this park has recorded in the modern undisputed era, 130 degrees, did not happen in July. It happened on the 16th of August, 2020. And August does something July never does. It is the one month of the year this desert stops being a desert. This is the story of how that happens, why the people who die here in August are almost never the reckless ones, and why the most dangerous thing you can do out here is the exact thing your own body will beg you to do. Start with a morning that should not have been possible. On the 5th of August, 2022, roughly 1,000 people woke up inside Death Valley National Park and discovered they could not leave, not because of the heat they had planned for. They could not leave because every single road into and out of the park was gone, buried, broken, or underwater. In the driest place in North America, in the first week of August. Hold that image, because everything in this video is built toward explaining it. And to explain it, we have to start with the lie the place tells you the moment you arrive. Drive in from the east, past the welcome sign, and down toward Furnace Creek, and the first thing you notice is how ordinary it feels. There are road signs and mile markers, a ranger station, a visitor center with cold drinks and a gift shop, a paved parking lot in a grove of date palms that somebody planted a century ago to make the oasis feel like home, out at Badwater Basin. The salt flats gleam flat and white, and there is a wooden boardwalk, so you can stroll a few hundred feet and stand at the lowest point in North America. Families wander out onto it in flip-flops to take photographs. The whole experience is built around one idea, that you are a visitor, and visitors are taken care of. That is the trap, not a hidden drop or a sudden cliff. The trap is comfort. It is the feeling that because the road is paved and the sign is bolted into the ground, the desert around it must be paved and bolted down too. It is not. The infrastructure ends exactly where the asphalt ends, and the asphalt is a thin gray thread laid across more than 3 million acres of one of the most hostile environments on the planet. And in August, there is a second layer to the lie, and it is the calendar itself. Peak season is over. The extreme heat headlines have stopped. The park is quieter, and quiet reads as safe. But an empty park is not a safer park. It only means there are fewer cars on the road to notice when yours has stopped. To understand why this 1 month is different, you have to understand why Death Valley is dry in the first place. Because the same thing that keeps it dry for 11 months is the thing that fails in the 12th. Death Valley is not really a valley in the ordinary sense. It is a deep, narrow trench cut into the earth. At Badwater Basin, the floor drops to 282 feet below sea level, the lowest point on the continent, and on either side the mountains rise almost straight up. The Panamint Range to the west, climbing past 11,000 feet, the Black Mountains walling off the east. Now, here is the part that makes it a desert. Between this valley and the Pacific Ocean stand 4 separate mountain ranges. Almost every storm that rolls east off the ocean is forced up and over those ranges, and as it climbs, it drops its rain on the far side of each one. By the time whatever is left reaches Death Valley, it has been wrung dry. The valley floor gets around 2 inches of rain in a year, against an evaporation potential many times that. No moisture in the soil. No clouds to block the sun. Nothing to break the heat. That shield works almost perfectly. but it only faces one direction. It faces west. And in late summer, the weather stops coming from the west. Every year, around the middle of summer, the winds across the southwest shift, and moisture begins pushing up from the south, off the warm water of the Gulf of California, riding north into Arizona, Nevada, and the California deserts. It is called the North American monsoon, and the 4 mountain ranges that so reliably block the Pacific are not standing in its way. It comes in from the wrong side of the fortress. August sits at the heart of that monsoon season, and August is also the peak window for something worse, the remnants of tropical storms and hurricanes spinning up off the coast of Mexico and tracking north into the interior. When that happens, an entire ocean's worth of moisture can be steered directly over the hottest, driest, most flood-hostile ground in the country. So this is the truth the calendar hides. August is not a little wetter than the rest of the year. August is the one month when the wall that makes Death Valley a desert simply does not cover the direction the water is coming from. And when the water does come, the ground makes everything worse. The valley floor is desert pavement, a hard, sun-varnished crust baked so tight that it sheds water almost the way asphalt does. Rain that would sink harmlessly into soil anywhere else finds nowhere to go. It runs off the instant it lands, gathers speed, and pours into the washes and the canyons. And the road network, every paved mile of it, was laid across those drainages, because in terrain like this, there was nowhere else to put a road. Look at an alluvial fan sometime. One of those wide, sloping aprons of rock and gravel that spill out of every canyon mouth in the park. They are among the most photographed shapes in Death Valley. Every single one of them was built by a flood. They are nothing but the piled debris of thousands of them, stacked up over tens of thousands of years. This is not a place where floods are rare. This is a place made of floods, with a road laid across the top. Before we go back to that flooded morning, you need to understand the thing everybody comes here already afraid of. Because you have to respect the heat before you can understand why it is not the part that kills you. Your body, at its core, is a cooling machine that runs on water. When you get hot, you sweat, and as that sweat evaporates off your skin, it carries heat away with it. In a normal environment, the system works beautifully. It is why you can run a marathon or stand in a hot kitchen all day. But the whole thing depends on one condition. The air around you has to be cooler than you are. That is what lets heat flow out of your body and into the air. In Death Valley in summer, that stops being true. Once the heat climbs past about 99 degrees, the air outside is hotter than the inside of your body, and the physics reverse. The air is no longer pulling heat out of you, it is pushing heat into you. Your skin, your breath, every surface of you begins absorbing energy from the environment instead of shedding it. The only tool you have left is sweat. And in air this dry, your sweat evaporates the instant it appears, which means you are losing water at a frightening rate and never feel wet. People out here can lose more than a liter an hour without seeing a single drop of it. You drink to keep up, and you cannot drink fast enough. The water leaves faster than you can replace it, and as you dehydrate, the sweating slows down, because there is nothing left to sweat. The moment your sweat fails, your last cooling system is gone, and your core temperature begins to climb. Normal is 98.6. By the time you feel dizzy and sick and your heart is pounding, heat exhaustion has already set in. Past 104 degrees, heat stroke begins, and your organs start to cook from the inside, the liver, the kidneys, the brain. And the brain is where the real cruelty of this place lives. Because one of the very first things to go, before the collapse, before the seizures, is your judgment. Heat stroke makes you confused, then irritable, then disoriented, then certain of things that are not true. That is the single most important fact in this entire story. The people who die in Death Valley are almost never killed by the heat while they sit still and think clearly. They are killed by a decision to keep hiking, a decision to leave the car, a decision to walk towards something on the horizon. And that decision is always being made by a brain the heat has already begun to damage. Hold on to that idea, because you are going to watch it happen again and again. Now here is the part that finally answers the title. All of that is true in July. In August, it gets one turn worse. and almost nobody sees it coming. That same monsoon moisture that brings the floods also puts humidity into the air, and humidity is the one thing that attacks the only defense you have left. Sweat cools you by evaporating, and sweat evaporates far more slowly into humid air. So a monsoon season 115 degrees, with moisture riding in from the south, is more dangerous to a human body than a bone-dry 118-point August. Does not lower the temperature enough to save you. It just quietly takes away the dryness that was doing half the work of keeping you alive. The most common way people die here is the most ordinary thing imaginable. They are in their car. Park records going back years show that motor vehicle incidents are the single largest cause of death in the valley, and the heat is woven through nearly all of them. Because a car in Death Valley is two things at once. It is the best shelter you have. A metal box with shade, air conditioning, and a cooler full of water. And it is a machine running flat out against a temperature it was never built for. Engines overheat. Tires that were perfectly fine in a city blow out on pavement, hot enough to soften the rubber. Air conditioning compressors give up. On one 128-degree afternoon, the park reported at least 3 separate vehicles breaking down from overheated engines alone, and warned that a breakdown like that can turn fatal fast when there is no air conditioning left between you and the sun. The moment the car stops working, the box that was keeping you alive becomes an oven sitting in the open. On the 1st of August, 2024, a 57-year-old man named Peter Hayes Robineau from Duarte just outside Los Angeles drove into this park. That afternoon, Furnace Creek read 119 degrees. He walked the Natural Bridge Trail, 1 mile round trip, a short rocky route that the park specifically recommends avoiding on hot days, and bystanders saw him stumbling on the way back to the parking lot. They offered to help him. He turned them down, and the people who spoke to him said his answers did not make sense. Then he got into his car, and he drove it off a 20-foot embankment at the edge of the parking lot. The car rolled, the airbags fired, and he walked away from it. Bystanders helped him into a patch of shade while someone ran to call 911 at 10 minutes to 4. Rangers reached him 20 minutes later, and he was still breathing. They started CPR. They moved him into an air-conditioned ambulance. He was pronounced dead at 4:42 in the afternoon. The coroner found that he died of hyperthermia, of the heat. Look closely at what actually happened there, because the crash was never the accident. The crash was a symptom. By the time Peter Robineau put his hands on the wheel, the heat had already taken the one thing that could have saved him, the part of him that could have recognized he was in no condition to drive. The desert reached into his mind and removed his judgment first, exactly the way it always does, and the car going over the edge was just the visible part of a death that was already underway. And here is the detail that turns any breakdown out here into a death sentence. Across most of those 3 million acres, there is no cell signal. None. You can stand on a paved road, in a national park, in the most connected country on Earth, hold up your phone, and watch it search for a tower that is not there. If your car dies on the wrong stretch of road on an August afternoon, no one is coming, because no one knows. By now, you might be telling yourself that the people who die here are doing something obviously foolish. Driving on bad tires, riding motorcycles through an oven. The next death should take that comfort away from you. On the 28th of August 2016, a 40-year-old woman named Pai Wei Hung was driving through the southern end of the park on a remote unpaved track called Harry Wade Road. Somewhere out there, she tried to turn her vehicle around and got it stuck in the loose sand of the berm. She was not reckless, she was not unequipped. She had a working vehicle sitting on the road where a search team would eventually think to look, and that vehicle was the single best thing she had: shade, shelter, and a large metal object far easier to spot from the air than a person on foot. She left it, and she walked about 5 miles away from the road into the open desert. Searchers found her body that afternoon. It was 113 degrees. That is the pattern, and it is the answer to why nobody just walks out. The instinct to go and find help feels like the responsible choice, the active choice, the brave one. But it is being generated by a brain the heat has already compromised. A brain that has quietly become certain you can make it when you cannot. The desert convinces you to leave the one thing keeping you alive, and then it lets you walk as far as your legs will carry you. And if someone does realize you are missing, if a call does get out, there is one more cruelty waiting, and it is the cruelest of all. When the air gets this hot, it becomes thin, and thin air does not give a helicopter's blades enough to push against. Medical helicopters generally cannot fly safely much above 120 degrees. So the aircraft that is supposed to be your lifeline, the thing that can cross 60 miles of desert in minutes and carry you to a hospital, is grounded by the exact heat that is killing you. It has happened here over and over. Rescues delayed, recoveries pushed to the cool of the evening because the sky was too hot to hold the helicopter up. The heat does not just attack your body, it cuts the rope you were counting on to be pulled out. If this breakdown is holding your attention, take 1 second to subscribe. This channel goes deep on one deadly American place at a time, the real geography, and the real people, every single week. Now I want to tell you the story this whole video has been building toward, because it is the clearest answer there is to the question in the title. Start with what August is supposed to be. Furnace Creek, the weather station at the center of this park, the one that holds the world record, collects about 2 inches of rain in an average year. That is the entire allowance. 12 months, 2 inches. And for the month of August specifically, the average is about 1/10 of an inch. Not 2 inches, 1/10 of 1 inch. For the whole month, hold that number, because everything that follows is measured against it. By the first days of August 2022, Death Valley had recorded 4/100ths of an inch of rain for the entire calendar year, the driest start to a year since 1953, when none fell at all. The valley was doing exactly what the valley does, cooking, emptying out, waiting. And then, at around 2 o'clock in the morning on the 5th of August, it began to rain. There was a man on a hillside that night who had come specifically to watch the sky. His name is John Serlin, a photographer and storm-chasing guide from Arizona who has been coming to this park for years, and he had climbed onto a boulder to shoot lightning as the storm rolled in. Afterward, he said it was more extreme than anything he had ever seen there. That is the verdict of a man whose entire profession is standing in the weather other people flee from. The storm sat over the valley for about 3 hours. In those 3 hours, Furnace Creek recorded 1 46/100ths inches of rain. Set that against the baseline. That is roughly 3/4 of everything this place receives in an average year delivered before sunrise. Measured against a normal August, it is on the order of 1,300%, 13 times a full month's rain in a single morning. It came within 1/100th of an inch of the wettest day ever recorded here, a record that had stood since 1988. The National Weather Service called it a 1,000-year event. And here is what a 1,000-year rain does to ground that cannot drink. Almost none of it soaked in. The water came roaring down out of the canyons, carrying everything the canyons had been storing for a century: gravel, rock, mud, and it crossed the roads at right angles, because the roads had been laid across the drainages with no other choice. At the inn at Death Valley, the floodwater picked up dumpsters and shoved them through the parking lot into parked cars, driving vehicles into one another. When the water dropped, around 60 cars sat buried under several feet of debris. The water system serving Cow Creek was knocked offline, and every road into and out of the park closed. Now count the people. About 500 visitors, about 500 staff, 1,000 people inside the hottest place in North America in the first week of August, with no road out. Nobody was hurt. That matters, and it needs saying. This is not a story about a body count. It is a story about how fast the exit can disappear. It took an estimated 4 to 6 hours just to clear enough of Highway 190 to let people begin leaving from the eastern side. And this was already the second flood in the park that same week. Everyone got out. The cars were dug free. The roads were patched. The story ran for 2 days, and then it stopped running. That was the practice run. 12 months and 15 days later, on the afternoon of Saturday, the 19th of August, 2023, the remnants of Hurricane Hillary arrived over Death Valley and did not leave until Monday. On Sunday the 20th, Furnace Creek recorded 2 2/10 inches of rain. That is the wettest day in the recorded history of this park. It broke the record set the previous August, a record that had itself stood for 35 years until 2022 nearly took it. 2 records in 2 consecutive Augusts, in the driest place on the continent. More rain fell on Death Valley in that one day than the valley receives in an entire ordinary year. Around 400 people sheltered in place at Furnace Creek, at Stovepipe Wells, at Panamint Springs, not waiting hours for a lane to open the way they had in 2022, sheltering, because there was nowhere to move them to. CA 190 is the spine of this park. It is the road you came in on. Whole sections of it between Zabriskie Point and Furnace Creek were destroyed. On Emigrant Canyon Road, the pavement did not crack. It left, dropping away to gaps 6 feet deep where the road surface used to be. More than 1,000 miles of park road were damaged. And Death Valley National Park closed for 56 days, the longest closure in its history. Now here is the part I want you to sit with. The roads came back in pieces over years. 195 miles in 1 week of March 2024, another 382 the week after, crews grinding through the following spring, and the spring after that. One route, Lower Wild Rose Road, did not reopen until June of 2026, nearly 3 years. The flood had destroyed most of its asphalt and carved a drop 9 feet deep straight across the roadway, and when it finally came back, it came back unpaved. That was about 8 weeks ago. A storm that lasted a single weekend in the summer of 2023 was still closing roads inside this park this summer. The heat here leaves every night, a little, and comes back every morning, and it is survivable. And it is exactly as advertised on every sign at every entrance. The water comes once every few years for 3 hours, and it is still there 3 years later. That is the answer to the question in the title. It is not the heat, because the heat is the danger you already respect. You packed for it. You read the sign about it. You started at dawn because of it. The heat was never going to be the thing that surprised you. August kills by taking away everything you were counting on to survive the heat. The road you drove in on, the signal you assumed you would have, the helicopter you assumed could reach you. The way back, the temperature does not have to change at all. Everything around it does. The helicopter cannot come, and in August neither can the road. Step back and look at all of it together, and a pattern comes into focus. The people who die here are not hardened survivalists who push too far. They are regular visitors. A man who finished a 1-mile walk. A driver who tried to turn her car around. A rider whose motorcycle never failed. 1,000 people whose only mistake was being inside a national park on a Friday morning. They are not the unprepared. They are the prepared for the wrong thing. The person who packed 4 gallons of water and had no possible way to know that a wash 3 miles up the road was about to start running. The valley does not require you to do anything dramatically stupid. It only requires one small mistake, one mechanical failure, one moment of misplaced confidence, and then it removes your ability to fix it. The margin between a great day and a fatal one is the width of a single bad decision, and the heat is standing at your shoulder the whole time, gently helping you make it. And still, you should go. Death Valley is genuinely one of the most beautiful places in the country. The salt flats at first light, the painted hills, the dunes going gold in the late afternoon. More than 1 million people come every year, and the overwhelming majority of them drive in, take their photographs, drink their water, stay near their cars, and drive home with nothing worse than a sunburn. The point of all of this is not that you should be afraid of the place. It is that you should be honest about what it is. It is not a postcard with a thermometer out front. In August, it is a floodplain that has learned to look like a desert. Come back one last time to the 1st of August 2024, and that parking lot at Natural Bridge. Peter Robino had done a 1-mile walk. That is all. A mile on a marked trail, a short distance from his own car. Strangers offered to help him, and he told them no, not out of stubbornness, but because by then The part of him that could weigh his own situation was already gone. The heat had taken it first. He got into a car he was no longer capable of driving in daylight in a parking lot and drove off the edge of it, and he survived that. He climbed out. People brought him into the shade. Help arrived in 20 minutes. He still had less than an hour left. The desert does not hate anyone. It feels nothing about the people who die in it, and nothing about the ones who live. That indifference, in a place this hot, is the most lethal thing there is, and in August it is indifferent in a second way that almost no one accounts for. It will hold a year's worth of rain over your head for 3 hours, and it will not tell you first. It will take the road out from under you between one afternoon and the next. It will strand 1,000 people in the hottest place in North America without the temperature moving a single degree. You will check the forecast for the heat. Everyone does. You will look at the number, and you will plan around the number, and you will feel ready. The heat was never the part that was going to surprise you. There is another American place on the screen right now that has quietly killed more careful, capable people than almost anywhere else in the country. And it does it with water, too, in a way nobody sees coming. Watch that one next.